Welcome to the Living Your Genius show with me, Donusia Lipinski, Unlocking Your Power Within. This show ignites your inner spark and empowers you to live a life filled with purpose and passion. Join Dr. Pat and me as we embark on a journey into the transformative power of your thoughts, inner genius, and creative imagination. In each episode, we deep dive into the realms of self-discovery, practical insights, and actionable strategies to unlock your full potential to thrive in all aspects of your life with grace and ease. Whether striving to overcome challenges, cultivate resilience, or pursue your passions with purpose, the Living Your Genius show is your go-to place for personal growth. Let's deep dive and unlock the power within to manifest the life of your dreams.
Hey, everybody, welcome. I'm Dr. Pat, and I get to take this incredible journey with Ms. Lipinski, Donusia Lipinski. Today, this is a really cool show. And it's one of these topics that we don't talk about enough. And the question is, are you ready to decide to thrive? The power of decision making. And part of that is deciding whether or not you're going to be happy. And, this is really the conversation to have: decision, indecision. Why do you watch some people that seem to be able to kind of like ebb and flow through life? Decision making is not really a burden for them. It's not even like a thing. It's like not a thing. And yet you see others that agonize over almost every decision. What are the underpinnings? And what do I mean by almost every decision? Well, let me give you a few examples. Have you ever been, in a situation where you say, what do you want for dinner? And the person says, well, I don't know. What do you want for dinner? And you go back and forth about dinner. And you're thinking to yourself, I'd really like to know what you want for dinner. And you're just not going to get that answer. So what is underneath decision-making, but more importantly, indecision? And what happens if you stay neutral? You see, because if you don't make a decision, you actually are making a decision. Donusia is here. We're going to take this conversation on. For those of you may or may not know, this is her fabulous genius show, Living Your Genius. But besides that, she has a phenomenal coaching practice. You're going to hear about that. Compassionate life mastery. This is something she does. She is a life mastery consultant, a high performance coach. And there are many, many things she does to help individuals, groups, communities really rise up. And what I mean by rise up, I mean rise up to be all that you were meant to be. Whether that's creating a very, very amazing dream or simply moving through the day-to-day of your life, your job, your relationship. But today is a conversation about decisions. And so what do we mean by that? How important is it for us to understand our own psyche when it comes to this? And then after all is said and done, what can you really do to do a better job at it? Donusia, right? That's what today's about.
Oh, Dr. Pat, I am so excited about this. You and I were talking yesterday about some of the ways that we make decisions. And I got to tell you that I love doing this work. I love sharing what I've learned, but in preparing and getting ready for this, it always takes me deeper into, ways that maybe I'm holding back and getting into indecision. We talked about that a little yesterday, and that conversation opened me up. So having this kind of a conversation, this kind of a dialogue is so important, because the high tide lifts all boats. The more that people can get in touch with what they choose in life, what they would love to have, the better off we all are. And indecision is really a decision, right? And so Jim Rohn says that indecision is the thief of opportunity. And Bob Proctor talked about people that don't make decisions because they're, what did he say? Decidophobes, right?
Yeah.
Because they're afraid to make decisions. And so it's safer to be indecisive, but it robs them of who they're here to be.
Yeah. I think part of this too is there's this like um, almost like sticky glue energy. And what I mean by that, we're going to talk about indecision first. We're going to come out of the gate with the nature of indecision. We're going to talk about that. And sometimes when you talk about something like this, it's a little vague. And I just want to break it down for a minute. I want us to talk about what does this mean? And what is indecision? And, I was talking to somebody the other day. It's a fascinating thing, and I would love for you to pick up and really help us describe this. But I was talking with somebody the other day, and they were at their job, right? And they were describing a situation where they had to perform something that was live. They were in charge of a live meeting, like a Zoom conference meeting, let's say. And so they're watching the Zoom conference meeting, and it's international, one of these international, blah, 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 you bring people in. And they're watching the meeting and they're responsible for it. And the boss knows they're responsible. And she noticed one of the participants didn't have good audio. And she asked me about it because what? I'm in the audio thing. And I just looked at her and I said, well, wait a minute. Didn't you have the meeting already? She says, yeah, I did. And I said, well, did you correct the audio in the meeting? And you could hear a pin drop. So decisions to do or decisions not to do are still decisions.
Exactly.
That's very different than being indecisive. When you make a decision, when you see that, and and I ask her, well, okay, well, what are you coming to me now for? She said, well, I should have corrected it. The audio was bad, the framing was bad. She said, I could hear you in my dreams. And I said, okay, but what did you do about it? She said, I didn't do anything. So let's talk about that, because doing nothing is what, Donusia?
I would say doing nothing is a decision,
Boom.
but it's also based on indecision, right? It's like,
Oh, good. That's why I told you this show. So, from your perspective, talk about indecision. What is it and what causes it?
well, Bob Proctor says that we, as children, our parents make decisions, people are making decisions. Nobody ever talks to us or trains us or gives us the responsibility of making decisions. And so we go through life and then we grow up and then we're in the world and we have to make decisions, but we don't, we have so much baggage from our childhood, right? That puts us in fear, failure. Am I going to get it right? Do I do it or don't? And then we get the influence of others, what other people think. And we get into the shoulds, and then we get into the hows, and we get into the fear. And so I forgot what the question was, Dr. Pat, because I think I kind of went off on a
Well, what
tangent.
is indecision? I think that's what we need to talk about. What is it? And there are consequences with our decisions and there are consequences with indecision, but we don't think there are. We think we're safe with indecision or ambivalence. We really do. And I don't know about you, but it's always come back to bite me. Whenever I have been in a scenario where I know that there was a decision I had to make and I didn't make it comes back to get me one way or the other. And so we're talking about this strange thing called indecision or ambivalence. And there are two kinds there are really only two kinds. There's the indecision and ambivalence where you actually care. Like my friend really cared. I mean, like a week later, but nothing I could do to help her with that. But she really did care. She couldn't bring herself to correct it in the moment. The consequences of that have a ripple effect. And then there are the other folks. They're like, I ain't making a decision. And guess what? I don't care. And then there's an impact on that. So from where you said, what are indecisions and what is it that gets in our way?
So, I mean, decisions really, indecision is when you can't make a choice, when you don't make a choice or you choose not to you don't even know that you have a choice or you don't make a choice. So the ambivalence is where you're kind of like you're kind of drifting. But there are impactful decisions there are other decisions that aren't quite as impactful, and then just other decisions that are just like you don't even think about. And so the decision that the person that was on the show, she made a decision to not take action. That had an impact on her, and that's a great learning tool, a great learning opportunity for her to take forward as to the impact and the consequence and the emotion of not having taken the
Yeah.
action that she could have taken. That
Yeah.
leads us to regret, but that also causes us to feel a little less secure,
Yeah.
right? That I should have, like, it's a shoulda, coulda, woulda, right?
Yeah.
I wished I had, and the decision to not do something and then to live in that regret, moving that forward, I think causes her to feel even less confident and maybe
Mhm.
less empowered, or for any of us.
Yeah.
And so I think that indecision is living, it's going along. It's not having, it's inconsequential. And it robs us of fulfillment. It causes stress. It causes anxiety. It causes going to you and to other mentors saying, this is what I did. What do you think? And then we get into this whole area of the wobble, right? The
The
wibble
wobble.
wobble, right? The
Yeah.
wibble wobble.
Yeah. You know, this really in our industry, I mean, and it's not just this industry, but I did a show an hour ago and it's a high profile show. And for me, when I do the Dr. Pat show, I'm very demanding. I expect the framing to be done right. I don't want one head to look like a giant head and another one to look like a little baby head. I mean, there are just some things about that that are important. But if you do a whole high profile show, it's even different. You know, I remember my interview with Olivia Newton-John. It was a complete nightmare, and I thought we were responsible for it until Olivia said, with the accent that she had, I'm so sorry, Dr. Pat. I was going through a tunnel and we kept dropping. You see, and the producer didn't want to ask her, didn't want to say, are you having trouble with your connection? Right? He wouldn't ask her. He wouldn't, so what would happen? She dropped 4 times. So we're sitting there. It's my first interview with Olivia Newton-John, really a lot for
Mm.
me. It was such an honor. And she kept dropping until finally, the second interview I did with her, she said, I'm so sorry. We kept going through tunnels. And to this day, that producer never went back. All he would have needed to do is just say, it sounds like we're dropping. Are you having, connection issues? But you see, we do that all the time. And it isn't just with things like this. We do it every day in our lives. We do it with our family, we do it with our friends. Indecision right now, indecision in the business world is deadly for people. Oh my gosh.
If I invest, should I invest? Should I stay or should I go? Right? And in the business world, it's there's so much uncertainty around us that we look at our circumstances as opposed to listening to that little voice, or that huge, powerful voice inside of us to really guide us. But we get into the fear and the anxiety and the stress of indecision. It's like, and it's so hard to be on the fence and to maintain that balance on the fence. People talk about the pros and the cons, and there is a process of like gathering information after you've made the decision, but people don't want to make a decision until they have whatever it is that they need to have. And Bob Proctor talks a lot about decision and people that say, I want to buy a house, but I don't have the money. And he says, well, make the decision first to buy the house and then work out how the money, not your, and then the money works its way through depending on the process that you're going through. I would love to, I mean, man, I think that the reason that why this topic is so dear to me is that I went through years of indecision, right? Not knowing what I wanted, checking with other people,
Mm,
um, looking at my family and what my family had done and becoming a teacher and then being an auto worker. And then it's like, I remember letters to my brother saying, I think I'm going to figure it out pretty soon. And it was agonizing. And then when the pain of wherever we're at is so intense, that's when, and if we're open to just like something has to change, that's when
mhm.
sometimes when the vision can drop in. And then it was going to law school. Like, who was I to go to law school? Right. And my boyfriend said that I wasn't logical. If I had listened to his opinion, and I did listen to his opinion, and
Hmm.
I thought, oh my God, I'm not logical, but I'm going to law school and lawyers have to be logical. And so all the anguish, Dr. Pat, that I went through, and then years later, all the ways that I had thought I had wasted time, right? Because I had lost so many years
Yeah,
without realizing, of course, that that is just the content of my life is the curriculum of my evolution. Like that's part of my growth.
yeah,
It's not whether it's good or bad. It's like that's part of my process. But we all have a purpose here. And if we're
yeah.
afraid to go out on the limb because we're afraid of what others might think, or worse, if we share what our vision is with other people and they say, you can't do that. Who are you? Like, you don't have the money. You don't have the whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we get back into indecision. It's like, well, maybe I'll do it later.
Yeah. Look, I just finished an interview with Bob Parsons. Bob Parsons is the billionaire. He is, and he is the founder of GoDaddy. Now, he's still not in that. He's always going to be the founder of GoDaddy, and he just put a fantastic book out. Um, and I got to talk to him, and he's the person that I've always wanted to have a conversation with. And because, if it wasn't for GoDaddy and how easy GoDaddy was for somebody like me 20 years ago, that didn't, not a developer, that didn't know how or why you should get a domain name, right? I mean, if it wasn't for the ease by which they helped you to do things, right? Um, so much of what we've built wouldn't be viable. So anytime I talk to people now, I say, if you don't have the domain, go buy it. If you're launching a brand, go buy it. But I had a conversation with him, and his book is fantastic, but I love what he said. So he reminded me of my true north. And he reminded me that we have to continue to dream. He also reminded me of the fact that if you're an entrepreneur, it's not about the money that will make you successful. He talked about the fact that you have to love what you do. But in that same breath, and in his book, he's very clear about not to share your dream. Just do it. And, that idea, why would we share a dream? Well, in my case, I've always been very excited, so I want to share it with somebody until they look at you and say, "Oh, ridiculous." At the end of the show, and I think Emily has got the clip of that, the recording of it. I think she has the recording. At the end of the show, we were done. And he said something unexpectedly to me. And this is to your point. He said, I love your logo. Now, this is the founder of GoDaddy, right? We're talking about his book, Fire in the Hole. Oh, it's an amazing book. Vietnam, PTSD, the whole thing. But at the end, he could have said a million things to me. And he said, I love your logo. And I said, wow, thank you. Now, he didn't know how the decision was made about that logo. And he said, I love that you have two heads. And I love that you put one head inside of the other. And I said, Bob, no one has ever pointed that out to me. So he knew it was intentional. But I had to make the decision about that logo without anybody else's input. And I did get a little input, but I guarantee you, if I'd have asked people about that logo and the head inside of the head, there would have been a million reasons why you should take the one head out. And then he said, oh, and they're facing in different directions. You see, a simple idea about a logo or what to eat for lunch, it doesn't have to be agonizing. And that's why we're talking about this today. Had I asked 50 different people about that logo, I'd have probably gotten 50 different answers. But the question, it was a logo for the network that I founded. And if I'm not happy with it, it really doesn't matter, right? That other people are not. So this is what we're talking about. Are we making decisions that we know within our heart, within our soul, are about things we love, even if it's having pizza for dinner? I love pizza for dinner, by the way.
So do I.
Yeah. Yeah. I even like leftover pizza. But isn't that what we're talking about? The impact on life choices.
Yeah, so the power of, I mean, you're right. If you would still be, you would not have chosen the logo that you chose, right? Getting people's opinions because it's not them, it's you.
Yeah.
It's what would you love? How does it speak to your heart, to your message?
Yep.
And so Bob Proctor and Napoleon Hill actually has a whole chapter in Think and Grow Rich on decision or on indecision, but on decision. And so he says to not share your vision, your dream with other people because number one, if you don't act in it, they could take your ideas and run with it, which I hate to think of that as what that people would do that, but
They
that
do
has
that. I
happened.
have 2 trademarks right now that people are trying to literally claim. And you know
But
what's saving me in the trademark fight? The fact that one of them, I got the domain name in 2001 and the other one in 2005, right? But they do that.
I
You know,
know
that's one reason. But even more importantly, you're going to listen to them. And you're going to listen to them even if what they say makes you rethink something you love. And that's the problem. That's
it
the problem.
it creates doubt, it creates indecision, and ideas are like slippery fish.
Mm-hmm.
Ideas are like slippery fish that'll swim away and frequently
Mm-hmm.
won't come back when you have that idea, that moment of
Mm-hmm.
inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And if you share it with somebody and they think you're crazy or they look at you like you're nuts and they
Mm-hmm.
find all the reasons for whatever the reason is that you can't do it or you shouldn't do it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not their dream, it's your dream, it's our dream. And so
Yeah.
when we get into indecision, we're wibble wobbling, we're like on a teeter totter, right? Yes and
Well,
no,
yeah,
yes and no.
yeah, yeah. But you know, let's talk about what it means to harness the power of decisions because you know, even in the conversation I was having with them, I asked him a question about doubt. It was, and I knew what his answer was going to be because I read the book. And he sat back in his chair, and I don't remember exactly. I think Emily probably remembers it better than I do. But he sat back in his chair and he said something like, "Yeah, maybe for a few minutes." Right. So if you read his book and you read his history and you read what he went through in that in his experience in Vietnam, I mean, if you just read it, you'll see there are a few nuggets you walk away. He never worries, ever. Now, why is that? If you make decisions for yourself, what would you worry about? If you're making decisions on something you love. So let's talk about how empowering decision making is. And look, you're going to pick pizza for dinner, and somebody's going to come home and say, "Pizza again?" And you're going to not try to say, "Oh, honey, you're going to say, "Yeah, pizza again." And they're going to sit down, they're going to eat the pizza, right? Or you're going to feel so bad about your decision that you're going to stop and make macaroni and cheese or something. And see, this is what we do in life. So let's talk about the ripple effect of those choices. Because I think earlier you talked about the emotional factor in this. When do our choices create a ripple effect that goes from a great idea to become a burden?
When doubt and fear and worry set in, all those negative emotions that tell us we can't do it. But we're here for a reason. We have a purpose for being here. And so many people, I just heard the other day that every hour we make 2,000 decisions.
Mm-hmm.
in a day, 35,000, this is like Psychology Today was talking about this, 35
Yeah.
decisions that are made in a day. What kind of decisions are we making? I mean, some of them are like non-consequential, right? Well, I would say non-consequential in terms of affecting our life, right?
Right.
What are the
What, like
times
the color blue? Like I woke up this morning, decided we're blue.
right? But sometimes I wake up, Dr. Pat, it's like I put on something, it's like, that doesn't feel right, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Or, or even like when I do presentations, it's like I'll sometimes ask my sweetheart, like, what do you think? Now, it's only because I want his opinion, right? I have a feeling. And so sometimes I think that being in that wibble wobble, like of not really knowing for sure, like, what do you think? I think sometimes that can be helpful. Um, but we're not gonna, it's like if you want to get somebody else's input, and if they tell you, oh no, wear orange instead of the green, and you really dislike orange, like I mean, I would hope that you would go with the green, right? Or the blue, right? So there are, if you were talking to me the other day about your decision to get a car, right? And the color of the car and the kind of
That's
the car
right.
and your decision-making process in doing that. And what you had really, really wanted. And so, maybe we'll get into that process that you went into, but
Yeah.
really, I think the impact of not doing what we're here to do, to not fulfilling our purpose for being here, to not have the life that we would love to live has to do with decision. And before you can make a decision, Dr. Pat, it's really about clarity, right? We can't, you get clarity and then you make the decision. And what gives you the clarity? I think what gives you the clarity is when you pay attention to what you long for, what you would love more, what you would love more of, what would you love to dissolve in your life. And that's part of the work that we do as coaches, what we talk about. So our spiritual language, right? Spirit's talking to us, it would love us to grow in some way. And so we have that longing in our heart, we have that discontent. But once we notice what we're noticing, once we notice that, then we can then we can go back and look at what would we love instead. And we talk about the different frequency that we're at. We're at a certain level of where in our circumstances, and we want to get to this, we make a decision that we want to have this beautiful house or this wonderful job.
Yeah, exactly.
But you have to
Exactly.
make a decision for that first.
And when we come back, let's talk about that. Because now when we come back, we're going to talk about decision-making strategies. We think about what it feels like to be in that place where you're not making decisions
Mm.
for yourself, for what you want. And, Rhonda Britton, my friend of mine, of course, she's the founder of Fearless Living, but she also did a book, and the book title is, Do I Look Fat in This? And the title of that book alone gives you an indication of what's in that book and how we go about taking care of ourselves or not. When we come back, we're going to talk about decision-making strategies. And by the way, you can read so many books. I mean, in the business world, it's like, there's like Johari windows and there's conflict charts and all of those things. When we come back, we're going to talk about decision-making strategies, but also some decisions you make aren't always all about you. There may be sometimes you choose something to meet somebody halfway. You see, it's still a decision. We don't have judgment in this show about a good decision or bad decision, and we'll talk about that when we come back. Donusia, what's the best way for people to find out more about you?
Yeah, so my business is Grace and Ease Life Coaching. They can go to graceandeaselifecoaching.com to schedule a consult with me. They can reach me by texting 843-340-5083 and say I'm in, and I will set up a consultation with them to explore what they would love more of in their life to get more clarity so that they can make a decision as to what they're longing for and to have the
Yeah.
life that they would love to create.
Yeah. We're going to take a short break. What Donusia said is also remember this, information is important, but so is intuition. When we come back, we're going to talk about the information/data dance with intuition. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. You're listening to the Living Your Genius show with Donusia Lipinski. I'm Dr. Pat. I get to take this journey to unlocking your power within. Today, we're talking about decide to thrive, the power of decision making. You know, part of the first part of this show, we were talking about things where we decide not to thrive, but we don't really say it out loud. You know, when we do things we don't want to do and we know we're doing and we make that decision and then we have regrets or resentment about it. But, you know, we're going to shift gears here a little bit because each of us, you know, maybe you have a process, right, Danusia? Maybe there's a process that happens. You're an attorney, so you understand the process of law. You know, you understand that there is this thing that happens. Sometimes it's civil, sometimes it's criminal. You know, there are these processes. And the outcome of becoming a lawyer is that somebody is going to win and somebody is going to lose. That's why you get a lawyer, to defend you and or protect you, to defend if you're, you know, district attorney, then that's it. But you know you're coming to an ultimate decision. There's going to be an ultimate decision that is made from the minute you take on a client or not. There's a decision made. Ultimately, there's a jury. Maybe that makes a decision. I have a friend that's in the middle of a lawsuit right now, and I'm just watching, see if it's me. And I call my attorney and I don't hear from my attorney for 2 weeks. And this is my lawsuit that's been going on for 3 weeks, 3 years. I am standing in front of his door because that's the decision I would make if you don't call me back. But there's some people that, no, let's just keep the peace and I don't want to bother him. I don't want to interrupt. So let's talk about the process. How do we make one decision or the other? Because sometimes it is important not to interrupt. Sometimes it is important to keep the peace. And other times, it's like Bob Parsons says, fire in the hole. What's your process?
So there's a lot of different tools out there, right? The tool that I love to use most and that I recommend that people get in touch with is really just tapping into their inner power, their inner voice. There was a time where I was trying to decide whether I was working with Lisa Nichols and I was a lawyer and I was going to spend, I was fairly a substantial investment in going to, as opposed to going to an immigration law conference, to go to one of her Speak and Right to Make Millions conferences. I remember the indecision that I had and the process that I went through. Should I really go and invest money in this and not on another immigration conference? I remember I did muscle testing. And because I had learned the process of muscle testing and I had done muscle testing, but I did it so many times because I wanted to make sure that the decision that I was going to make was the right decision. But to make a decision, sometimes you get the gut feeling as to what you want to do or what you don't want to do. And then the how comes in. We talked about the howling how last time about, well, how are you going to do that? Right. But the process really is to have clarity and to really have it align with your core values. And once you once you know that you know that you know, like you got to do it, you've made the decision and the rest of the process will follow. But Dr. Pat, having the clarity as to what you really, really would love and let go of all the little peripherals, that's critical. So my process is basically tapping into my intuition. I used to do a list of the pros and the cons. Um, and it being on the horns of a dilemma, right? But that just, it's another way to be indecisive. It's not to say that we don't need to get information. Sometimes there's research that's involved, not regarding whether we should or shouldn't do something, but as to what the process would be for us to move forward. You think about people like President Kennedy, who decided to go to the moon, right? Like, how crazy was that? I mean, the things that people have done, the decisions that they've made, your decision, Dr. Pat, to do the Transformation Talk Radio. Like, what was your process to do that?
I'm going to tell you, you know, I got to go back to this interview I just did because I needed to hear what what Bob had to say, Bob Parsons. And out of the gate, and when he started to talk about golf, what he's doing now, what he's creating now, man, he lit up. And we were talking about that. And he reminded me, it's in his book, but he also said it. He said, you don't become an entrepreneur for the money, you become an entrepreneur for what you love. And that is a reoccurring theme. You do what you love until you don't love it anymore. That's why he sold his accounting company to what? Intuit or somebody, right? Built that from the ground up. And so for me, I don't think first. And this was the reminder for me today. He and I share something in common. We both grew up reading comic books. We're both Sagittarians, but we're both dreamers. We've always had dreams from a very young age, right? And we're both a little naive, and that innocence, that naive parts of us. I did a talk on the power of ignorance once. And people at first started to like almost boo, like they were going to throw something at me. But then I explained the difference between ignorance and stupidity. To your point, when we get information and we know better, and then we do something that we really don't want to do, that falls on the stupidity side. Ignorance is when you don't know. I often talk about the fact, how did I get to school? See, when I was 17, I turned around and I knew I wanted a PhD. Not because I wanted a PhD, because I saw how much fun PhDs at Bell Labs had. That's it. I want to have that fun. I equated it to a PhD and I declared it. I turned to Linda and I said, I want to get a PhD. And then I asked her what it is. The bottom line is I didn't think about what I had to do. I didn't know what was involved. I didn't even know I had to get like an undergraduate degree. But I didn't lose that. And, we're talking to Bob, he reminded me of something today. You have to know that you want something because you really love it. Same thing. I wanted an orange car. They were so hard to come by. This was last year, not a lot of cars in inventory, but I found orange SUVs all over. I located one in Idaho. They were going to ship it. And I started to ask myself questions because I follow a rule. This is my process. If it feels light, it's right. If it's not right, if it's not light, it belongs to somebody else. Whatever that is, whatever the thought's gonna, and I ask myself that question over and over again during time because it changes. And up until a point, having that orange SUV, like I've had 3 of them, getting another really bright orange SUV, so important. It felt light. Until one day, I asked the question, I can't remember the way I phrased it, but the question was, it's okay to get a different color. Does that feel light? And on that day, it did. So it was like, okay, it's okay to get a different color. But what is that color? And I go through a process. And I asked, well, black. Yes, that feels light. And I was sharing this story with you because I called the dealer who was just agonizing over trying to get the orange thing. Now, I had an orange when I was going to trade in, so somebody was very lucky to get that. But I said to him, you know what? I'm willing to look at another color. It's black. He's like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe I got a black platinum. It just showed up, da, 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 da. And that point on, that felt light. And that's the way to make decisions. But you have to have the passion, or you have to have the energy around what you truly want. And sometimes for me, when my head gets in the way, it messes things up. I'm very clear today what my passion is for the network. what my passion is for positive centric media, what my passion is for Unstuckable, even though somebody is trying to grab that trademark. Hello, had that domain since 2001. My passion is to help people. And that's what Bob and I had in common. Underneath all of this stuff you have the same thing. That's why you're Lord, passion to help people. And how that gets done has to be fueled by our passion to want to do it, right? Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely right. It's the burning desire.
Yeah.
You don't have the fuel to really manifest, to really get what you love, to make that decision if you don't have the passion for it. If it doesn't feel like, why would you why would you go on a venture for something that you didn't have passion for, that you didn't feel like, I love this? Because making a decision, like, it's not always going to be easy. We're getting
Right.
outside of our comfort zone. And so doing the work that you're doing the work that I'm doing, I knew for years and years and years that there was more work for me to do other than lawyering. I knew it. I put it off for many different reasons, but I knew, like this is the work that I'm here to do. I've known it since I was little that I have this part of me that I want to share to help other people live the lives that they would love, to help them realize that there are possibilities, to give them hope, to have them make the decision, and to have the courage and the clarity to do what it is for them to do in this world, because we all have a reason for being here.
Yeah.
And unless we start engaging in that power of making the decision, but got to have the clarity. And I just want to go back to, like, trusting your intuition, listening to that still small voice. I'm a feeler, right? So I go, like, I feel that I get little, I get, like, I'll get God bumps or goosebumps, like
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
eyes will water, like when I know
Yeah.
I'm on the right path, I feel it in my face, my eyes kind
Yeah.
of water. But so that's knowing, but then the decision to do something with it, even with that, I have those moments, Dr. Pat, where it's like, well, yeah, I've been wanting to do this since 2014, and then you asked me, so why haven't you done it? And I'm thinking, oh, this is such a great topic to be, I mean, to be vulnerable with, but just to say, yeah, right.
Well,
I have this.
it's a why question, but really the question is, take the word why. I use why as an acronym. Let's get back to the first segment. What's in the way? What's getting in the way?
The fear, right? Fear of the risk, the fear, not good enough, not confident. Who am I to do it? Like, all of that stuff, right? When you can get the clarity and let go of those negative, the limiting beliefs. And so one of the suggestions that that Bob Proctor, for example, has, and I think maybe Napoleon Hill, is just make a commitment, make a decision on something, and then follow through with it. And once you make the decision to let go, right? To take the steps that are yours to take, because as soon as you make a decision, you're operating at a higher frequency when you can see yourself
Yeah.
living that life that you would absolutely love. You're having the radio, sharing your message, letting other people share their messages, lifting, lifting the energy of the planet, Dr. Pat. The work that you're doing is so important.
Yeah. I love what Bob Parsons talked about today, because that's going to be my new go-to. I've always been like that. I've always been a lot like him. And so part of this is remembering how to do how to do what he says. Because if you follow a pathway, you know, when you have a dream, how that feels. It could be a dream to graduate high school. My stepmom, Mama Doris too, didn't have the opportunity. She had her first child at 12, second child at 13, but she had a dream that she was going to achieve more. She had a vision about that. And so that was the goal for her. That was in her heart. Now, how she got there was irrelevant to her. And that's what I remember from today. You have got to have that dream in your heart. If you have it in your heart, you hold on to it. You don't let the mind conjure up things that will hold you back. You've got to hold it in your heart and then tap in to the intuition, as you mentioned, of what the next step is. Because, see, if we sit down and we have a dream and we try to figure it out, it becomes daunting. Somebody asked me a question about, I can't remember the details of the question, but here was my answer. It was kind of like, we've heard you talk about going back to school, blah, 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 blah. Would you, knowing what you know now, would you do it again? And it's a tricky question. And I said, well, you're asking me later on in life, and the answer is going to be yes, I would. But if you'd have asked me right after I graduated, because of the nature of what I studied, I probably would have to take a step back. But I said, in the end, I've always had that vision and that dream. It was going to come. It was going to manifest because I held on to the dream. And they said, do you know why? I said, to this day, I now realize that I have been guided to go back to school and spend 10 years and a lot of money on a doctorate so people can say the Dr. Pat show. And the person that was interviewing is like, what? I said, look, there's so many answers to your question. But in the end, I'm not practicing what I study. And I have a show called the Dr. Pat Show. And I'm known as Dr. Pat. So what do you think? Do you think the divine led me on a path to spend $100,000 on a degree, 10 years of research, postdoctorate work, on a career that I never actually did, but somehow so that I could do a different career path that I now love? See, it doesn't always make sense, does it?
But it does, because the
But it
content of
does.
your life, the content of your life is the curriculum of your evolution.
Mm,
All of those experiences, some of those that you remember, some of those that you don't remember. It's like, it makes the Dr. Pat that I'm talking with today. It's the Dr. Pat that said, come do this with me. Let's do this show, right? Let's
yeah,
do this together. I'll
yeah.
walk this path with you. So it's all of those experiences. It's your experiences that help you understand all of the people that you have on your shows, right? To give them the voice.
Love
So
them.
thank goodness that you.
Yeah, let me ask you a question, because this goes to decision making and great thinkers. And let's just talk about that. I'm kind of having second thoughts about it.
About what?
Decision makers and great thinkers. And I'm trying to think, especially coming off of this interview, which is very fresh for me. Great dreamers, people that are uncompromising, great dreamers that can dream big. That's the juice. See, because if you're in that energy of that, and you enable yourself to dream despite growing up in the projects, or in Bob's case, growing up in, not so good circumstances, it doesn't matter what you do. He didn't just become the founder of GoDaddy. And even how they got the name GoDaddy is fascinating. But it's the vision and it's the dream. I had the dream for the Transformation Network before it was formed. But if I'd have got hung up on how the pieces would have fell into place,
We wouldn't be here.
yeah. So how would you like to, articulate for people how we become great thinkers with great visions, even if it's about pizza? That's a bigger decision than you think. You know what I'm saying? Because think about the mom that does this. See, I grew up with a mom that, very busy. Why would you go to, everybody, I love pizza. So, I'm sorry, it's on my mind right now. But why would a mom and a family do that? One, you can order it. Two, right now, you could pretty much get pizza so cheap, right? I mean, every time I turn on TV, what? It's like $7 for like a pizza with all a bunch of. Three, It hits all 4 food groups. It does.
Well, depending on the pizza, Dr. Pat.
It depends on the pizza, but if you get the meat one, you're good to go. But the other thing, believe me, I had a mom that knew 3 steps ahead she was going to go to bingo that night. So her vision wasn't about the pizza. The pizza was a way for her to get that vision enacted. Because if she wanted to go to bingo that night, she did not want to cook dinner and would not have time. So you see, what is it you're holding on to where you can see the pieces that fit in? If you're an entrepreneur, right? You want to, what do you have to do? Go get a business license. But you see, we're talking about decisions today. You know, Gabrielle Ambon, no regrets. And if you're living a life of regrets, you can change that by the next decision you make, right, Donusia?
You started out this program by talking about the decision to be happy, right? And there's The Power of Decision by Charles Barker. And that's what he talks about is to make a decision to be happy. Make the decision to be happy. Decide to live richly. Decide to be happy. Decide to be creative. And so it's all about the choices that we have. We think that we're boxed in by circumstances and by what's around us and by our social status or economic status, but we have choices to make. We say that we have to do this or we should do this. Like, no, what would you love? It goes back to the passion, goes back to your purpose in being here. What makes you feel fulfilled? And then go do that. It's the Henry David Thoreau quote, right? The advance confidently in the direction of your dream, endeavoring, right? Like things will rearrange themselves. It goes into intuition, what you had talked about earlier. Trusting that inner voice. We don't have to know the how, the howling how, right? Let that go so that we can become all that we're meant to be. And so I think that we're at time, but I want to wrap up with this quote by there's 2 quotes. One is by Bob Proctor that says, there is a single mental move that you can make, which in a millisecond will solve enormous problems for you. It is called decision. And the other one is successful people, which is what we're talking about. Successful people make decisions quickly and firmly. Unsuccessful people make decisions slowly and they change them often. And so I think as we go forth, just have the clarity, make the decision.
Yeah.
Learn from whatever you learn as you go through the process.
Thank you. It's a great topic. A lot of inspiration. Bob Proctor, a genius, of course. Bob Proctor was incredible man. You know, one of the people that clearly inspired me 20 years ago and beyond. So thank you for using and bringing his wisdom. How do people find out more about you? Let's give them your website.
Donusia Lipinski. I'm a life transformation coach at Grace and Ease Life Coaching. You can find me at graceandeaselifecoaching.com, which is a GoDaddy.
Yep.
Which is GoDaddy.
And we're not affiliated with GoDaddy. Just want to say, everybody out
no.
there, this is purely from our hearts and our experience.
And they can reach out to me just by sending me an email at danusia@danusia.com. But my website has all the information about how to get in touch with me. They can call me at 843-340-5083. But most importantly is if people are stuck and they don't know the direction that they want to go in, contact me. Let's have a conversation. I would love to do that.
I love it. That's your first decision, by the way. Picking up the phone, going to the email, getting a hold of Donusia. Thank you, Donusia. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Pat, for being here. Love our time together.
I love it too. Thank you all. And remember, whatever you do, however you get there, check into your heart. That's where the genius is. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you for watching the Living Your Genius show, Unlocking Your Power Within, with me, Donusia Lipinski, and Dr. Pat on transformationtalkradio.com. We are here every 4th Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific for practical insights, inspiring stories, and actionable steps to unlock your full potential and manifest the life of your dreams. Your journey to living your genius awaits. For more information on how to design the life you deserve and unlock the power within to live a genius life, visit graceandeaselifecoaching.com That's graceeneaselifecoaching.com. See you next time.